Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman of the Football History Dude podcast, and I'm stopping by this show real quick to tell you about a couple of cool giveaways that we have going on here at the network. Both are autograph books covering various topics of the NFL. The first is The Point After, How One Resilient Kicker Learned There Is More to Life Than the NFL by ex-NFL kicker Sean Conley. It goes over his unique experience as a walk-on kicker at the University of Pitt after never playing high school football. And then it gets into some of his time playing for NFL teams and so much more beyond the gridiron. The other is from author Kevin Bryant. His book is titled Spies on the Sidelines, The High-Stakes World of NFL Espionage. This book started as a curiosity, kind of a passion project to understand everything revolving around, well, Spygate. But this put Kevin down a rabbit hole learning about all sorts of espionage that has occurred throughout the history of the NFL. Both permissible and often the illicit techniques of gathering intel to try to impact the outcome of the game. To sign up for your chance to win an autographed copy of one of these books, all you gotta do is head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways and sign up. That's sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways. Again, check out all the other podcasts that we have in the Sports History Network as well. But now, back to your regularly scheduled journey to the sports history timeline.
Welcome to the show, everybody. So glad you're here. So glad you're here with me, listening, enjoying. And here's another week of dingers and dunks with one guy with a mic. This week we are going to be talking about the 1919 World Series. And, since the Field of Dreams game was just played this week between the Cubs and the Reds, I thought it was fitting to bring up the 1919 World Series and the Chicago White Sox gambling scandal. Which, by the way, I got started digging into this, and there was way more information that I have learned researching this than I ever knew before. The only thing I knew before was the movie 8 Men Out and then the book by Elliot Asnoff. That was it. That's the only thing that I went off of. And come to find out, most of those are Hollywood propaganda. So, and added extra details to it that probably didn't need to be added. So first off, Bill Russell got his number 6 retired this week, or will be having his number 6 retired by the entire league. My guess and talking to other people, that what's going to happen is LeBron's still going to be able to wear number 6 like usual. So is Porzingis, but it's just going to be like the Jackie Robinson retirement in 1997 when Major League Baseball retired the number 42. Mariano Rivera and Mo Vaughn were still able to wear number 42, and then just when they retired from the game, that's when the 42 would just go away. And Mariano Rivera was the last person to wear 42, and if all goes right and Kristaps Porzingis stays with number 6, he'll probably be the last guy to wear number 6 in the NBA as well. So let's get started with this. We're going to start with the Did You Know of the Day. I found this little fun fact. And Felix Hernandez, former pitcher for the Seattle Mariners, is the only pitcher in Major League Baseball history to have pitched a perfect game, an immaculate inning, and has a 4K in one inning game as well. Just saying. And by the way, if you guys don't know what 4Ks in one inning is, it's when you strike out a batter, the catcher drops the ball, and the guy was able to make first base. So therefore, it doesn't count as an out, but it counts as a strikeout. And he was able to get 4 of them. Well, probably not 4 drops, but he was able to strike out 4 batters due to that. Also, on this day, in August 17th, 1957, Richie Ashburn fouled off 2 balls, hitting the same fan twice. Alice Roth was hit once and broke her nose, and the second one came in the same at-bat, mind you, when she was on the stretcher getting taken out of the stadium and got hit with another foul ball. Also, August 17th in 1982, the Cubs and Dodgers started a game, and then it finished on the 18th after 21 innings with the Dodgers winning 6-5. So, I was alive for that game, just don't remember it because I was like a month old. So, that's fun. All right, now let's get into like the real nitty gritty details of this. Now, I'm not going to be able to cover all of it, so basically this is going to be a summation of everything that I've discovered as I researched this week. The great team here at the great research team here at Dingers and Dunks, we were able to put together some information with some bits and pieces, kind of get a story behind it that's different than what the movie is and different than what the actual book is as well. And it's still intriguing as all get out. We'll start with my sources. First of all, we found sources from the Black Sox scandal by Bill Lamb on saber.org. We use baseballreference.com as always. Great website. I always plug it, even though I'm not partnered with it. Really should be. Might have to reach out to them, see what happens. We also found Jacob Pomecki.com, where we read 3 articles on there, which was gambling in the dead ball era, whitewashing of Hal Chase, and Call the Game, the 1917 Fenway Park Gamblers Riot. So that's all going to lead us into the Black Sox scandal, which we also used Wikipedia for some stuff, but as always, you can't really trust all of what's on Wikipedia, just what I find and what I tell you guys. Just saying. So let's start with the former players that were involved in this. Okay, well, let's start there. And actually, one was a current player still. So Hal Chase was a current / former player at the time. He was playing on the Giants in 1919, and then he got wind of the whole fixing of the World Series and started to get his own little web going as well. He also had Sleepy Bill Burns. Like I said, Hal Chase was known to throw games from 1905 to 1919. We're going to get a little bit more into him. And in 1920, while playing in the minor leagues, he was banned for bribery. He tried bribing Salt Lake City Bees pitcher of the Salt Lake City Bees of the PCL, their pitcher Spider Baum, to lose a game to the Los Angeles Angels. And in 1920, Rube Benton, a former teammate of Hal Chase, accused him and Heine Zimmerman of attempting to bring him $800 to throw a game when they were with the Giants. CP Bill Burns was a former player from 1908 to 1912, and he made he had a lot of gambling contacts. So the players from the White Sox that were involved in this whole shtick was Chick Gandil, Eddie Chicote, Shoeless Joe Jackson, Buck Weaver, Swede Riesberg, Happy Felsch, Lefty Williams, and Fred McMullen. And then the gamblers, again, this is even a longer list than what's in the book and the movie. You have Arnold Rothstein, known as the Big Bankroll, Abe Attell as Little Champ. He was a part-time Rothstein bodyguard and a full-time hustler. You had a Des Moines, Iowa gambler in David Zeltzer. You had Sport Sullivan from Boston and Nat Evans, but according to Abe Attell, Nat Evans was is an acquaintance of Rothstein, so basically he's trying to say that Rothstein knew about the whole deal beforehand and whatnot. And then you also had a St. Louis clothing manufacturer / gambler, Carl Zork, and Omaha bookie Benjamin Franklin, and both of them were heavily involved in a Reds victory. So let's start with a picture of gambling in baseball. All right, so gambling in baseball was actually around for a while. It actually had been probably really synopsis with the start of organized baseball, with the start of the National League, the start of many things. Gambling played a huge deal. As found on, Gambling in the Dead Ball Era by Jacob Pomrenke.com. That's Pomrenke, Pomrenke. The fact is, he states that the fact is indisputable that there has as long as there's been baseball, there's been gambling on baseball. In fact, before the Civil War, many fans and players, were financially invested as well. They would actually have gambling inside the stadiums, he states, as so that was a huge thing. They would do prop bets. They would do gambling and bookies and baseball all went together, and you could say, and then the first major scandal he makes mentions of takes place in 1877 when 4 members of the Louisville team, star pitcher Jim Devlin, outfielder George Hall, Bill Carver, and substitute Al Nichols were accused of throwing 3 exhibition games and some league games, and then they were permanently banned from organized baseball at that time by William Hulbert. And then it kind of died out, but then the 20th century happened, and then the American League was formed, and Ban Johnson became president, and he noticed what happened when the National League first started, and he didn't want that to be affecting when the American League started. So he ordered no betting at all in any ballpark. But then again, that had little effect because it was just a new way for people it had little effect whatsoever on that because people were still coming to the ballparks, gambling and everything else. And so, yeah. In fact, that year, so the 1903 World Series had a bribery attempt against the Boston stars Cy Young and Lou Krieger. Krieger immediately reformed Johnson, who denounced the plot, and Krieger was awarded his honesty by Johnson, paid him a pension for American League funds after his career ended. 1905 World Series had bribery rumors as well. It was suspected that star pitcher Rube Waddell suffered a suspicious late season injury and missed the series against the New York Giants. The story at the time was his left shoulder was hurt while wrestling with a teammate, but it's been persisted that rumors he was bribed by gamblers to fake the injury, and then the Giants won the series with Christy Mathewson. Game 6 of the 1912 World Series saw Smokey Joe Wood tell his fans to bet on Boston, and then Boston ended up losing that game, so then he got mad and he pitched Game 7, and then and then he would lose that one as well because he was angered about his friends losing that one. So basically, to get their money back, he lost Game 7. But Boston ended up winning in Game 8. And one of the reporters that kind of was harping about the 1919 World Series that was being fixed was Hugh Fullerton. He was kind of like the Woodward and Bernstein. Basically the guy that broke. Basically, he hammered it long enough to where people feel like he opened up the floodgates for it to be investigated and everything else. But he was quoted as saying after the World Series in 1918, the muckerishness of the fan is exceeding itself in muck this fall. Boston howled that it was all fixed, then raved over the team when it won. New York screamed that the Giants were throwing the series for a comparative trifling bet would risk Boston's title and the wealth that accrued to the winners. Stamp out gambling and end the talk of crookedness is at hand. So he was there trying to like get gambling out of baseball because it was really rampant. I mean, even like talking about getting in here a little bit about Hal Chase and like what he had. He was known for missing signs, and he was a hit and run specialist. He was known for missing signs. He was known for dropping balls, and in a subtle way that where it looked like their throws were errors and not him dropping the balls, even though he had like 406 errors, all which could be probably credited to him. You had that. You also had baseball owners running around with bookies and owning casinos and everything else. You had Cincinnati Reds owner in 1906, Gary Herman, admitted to betting thousands of dollars with 3 New York gamblers that the Pirates would not win the pennant. You had New York Giants owner Charles Stoneham and John McGraw co-owned a racetrack and a casino in Cuba. McGraw business interests also included a Manhattan pool room that he co-owned with Arnold Rothstein, who was part of the 1919 World Series. So you really had like a lot of just gamblers and baseball players mixing it up a lot is basically what you had. So Hal Chase didn't really he was running around with gamblers. He would be throwing games but really never got punished. He never really got punished until 1920 when he was when he got banned from the Mission League. So baseball gambling kind of a big thing in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And what really gets down to it is that even players would try to help other players out as well. So, like, if there were players that knew they needed a hit, like, for instance, Pomrinky talks about how the eased up, there was eased up during late season contests. So, Hall of Famer Sam Crawford once claimed that his friend Walter Johnson would throw batting practice fastballs to him when he needed a hit to raise his batting average. And Johnson would probably still hold the ERA if not for allowing, for not leisurely allowing 2 hits before removing, and then those runners come to score, because at that point he had a 1.09 ERA, and then after those 2 runs got scored, it bumped up to a 1.14, and then Bob Gibson obviously holds the mark at 1.12, and then they raise the mound. You also had the Cleveland Indians star, Nap LaJoy, Cleveland Guardians, Nap LaJoy was credited with 8 hits and 8 at-bats during a season-ending doubleheader against the Browns. At that point, LaJoy and Cobb were both tied for the batting title, and it was a new car from Chalmers Automobile Company. And so here's Ban Johnson hearing about this, and then because it was basically around the baseball circles that the Browns manager had ordered rookie third baseman Red Corridon to play well behind third base, and then therefore O'Connor and Corridon both hated Cobb. I mean, everybody pretty much hated Cobb back then. Even his own teammates hated Cobb. He was just very unlikable because he was out there to just beat everybody down. LaJoy laid down 6 bunt singles and beat them all out. So, and then, so there was that. It was just one of those things. I mean, Cobb still won the batting title, though, because he had a 384 and 944 average compared to LaJoy's 384 084 average. And then Chalmers ended up giving a new car to both of them. So, and then here's the White Sox in 1917 asking the Cubs Tigers, or a few years later, it was Cubs Tigers who were asked to lay down to help an opponent. In this case, it was the White Sox. September 1917, the first place White Sox were in a close race for the AL pennant. They met the Tigers in a crucial series. White Sox won all 4 games against Detroit while stealing 22 bases. And the catcher basically, Oscar Stanage, saying, that wasn't too unusual for me. Yeah. And then after that, each Chicago player contributed $45 to a pool for the Tigers pitchers. Even the clean Sox, like Eddie Collins and Red Faber. And then that money was given to Bill James, who distributed it to the rest of the staff. And it was just baseball as usual. So, yeah. So a lot of tomfoolery, shenanigans. A lot of money was passing hands for whatever. And then it all led up to 1917 in Boston with the Red Sox versus the White Sox. Oh, here the Chicago White Sox are involved in another gambling situation. So I'm not saying that they threw a World Series, but I'm also not saying the gamblers, kind of liked them as well. So here you have it. You have the Cincinnati Red Stockings. Again, this is from Jacob Pomerinke, and this is the call of the game, the 1917 Fenway Park Gamblers Riot. I would definitely go find these on the internet and read them, more than what I'm able to give a little synopsis of on these, because they're all very intriguing as well. So in this part, he kind of breaks it down to where all the gambling was. You had the Cincinnati Red Stockings as the first professional team. Obviously, that helped form it in 1877. Then you had the Louisville team of the National League throw 3 exhibition games and suspected of throwing the league games as well, then getting suspended. And then here comes the American League forming. And then we have the National League, and we got 2 different leagues. We're going to have a World Series played together. And so, yeah. So then Ban Johnson, who is the president of the American League, basically bans all betting at all his league's ballparks. Okay? But so that really wasn't really going to fix things, because you still had owners like Harry Frazee, the owners of the Boston Red Sox, the guy that's famous for selling off Babe Ruth, that he basically ran around with gamblers. And Harry Frazee was the first owner that wasn't handpicked by Ban Johnson, because the American League has always been known for a good old boys association. As I like to say it, is that they always handpick an owner. Major League Baseball pretty much does that on a regular basis anymore. It seems like the owners just pick whoever their best friend is. Every now and then you get a group that's in there that comes from elsewhere, but it just seems like, and maybe that's more of like when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, that's how it was, and maybe it's a little less now. Who knows? But so Johnson didn't like Frazee as an owner, because now this is where I have little David's, I have Stern implications here with the Chris Paul trade, and I'm a Clippers fan, and I loved that trade. However, Lakers fans are a little sore about it still. So you have Johnson's unsolicited recommendation for player trades and managerial hires usually went unheeded by Frazee. So here you have the president of the league trying to give day-to-day operations advice to an owner of a team. I think that's a little fishy, but Who am I? So, it's June 16th, 1917. Frazee has no indifference to gamblers. Didn't care. They could show up to the ballpark all day they want. They could hang out in right field as much as they wanted. No problem with that at all. Okay? So, they go out there. Had a chance to stamp out all the gamblers at once, and because of this big old riot. All right. So on June 16th, you have a violent thunderstorm that continued to pound the Atlantic coast on Saturday. Okay, that Saturday. So you have police. You have police in the building, but they basically didn't do anything in this whole ordeal. You got Eddie Chicote and Babe Ruth on the mound for the day. Okay, so it's downpouring rain. People have placed their daily wagers, large and small, on the games in the right field stands. Okay, Harry Frazier has a special police department on there, and there was fights and everything else, but nothing really that really took care of anything. Well, what ended up turning up is that with this rain and the Red Sox being down, Chicago was already had the lead, and people started calling for the game to be called because of the rain. If they would have just got to the fifth inning, it would have been an official game. So in the fifth, Ruth records. So Ruth in the fifth, top of five, gets two quick outs. Ray Schalk, the catcher for the White Sox, flew out to center, and Chicote grounded out to the shortstop. Okay, and then leadoff hitter Shane O'Callaghan stepped up to the plate for the White Sox, and all hell broke loose. A crowd of about 300 fans from right field bleachers, led by some tall man in a long raincoat, leap over the fence, and march onto the playing field. You have a former player from the Cubs in his first season as a major league umpire called time right away. And then he stood there and gazed in amazement to see what the crowd would do. They didn't rush players. They didn't rush umpires. They just stood around on the field to hold up the game. Okay? And they were obviously stalling time so that way this game would call, so then they would get a rain check for the day, plus they would get their bets back as well. So, and then you have all this goes down. They get out of there. The mob, they finally get the mob off the field. Blah blah blah. But then you have the gamblers after everybody's dispersed off the field. So, so you get this. There was still 1 out remaining before the game was official. Looked around for police officers. So then the head umpire looked around for police officers to help herd the mob off. He saw none. Blah. So then what ended up happening is other people jumped over, and then there was a riot that started, and it was just ridiculous. So once this first crowd leaves the stadium, that's when the gamblers decided to jump over the field and start a melee. Okay, they started throwing punches. They started getting hit. Buck Weaver started swinging a bat around. Like 35 minutes of mayhem before finally the cops show up to get everybody off, and then they were able to start the game all over again after this. And the White Sox ended up winning in 7-2. But yeah, it was just crazy. And you would have thought at that point that somebody would have been like, hey, we don't need more gambling in the ballpark. So that leads us up to 1919. Okay? So the 1919 World Series is between the White Sox and the Reds. All right? Now, I've looked at the stats on this thing. Okay? the White Sox went like 26 innings without a hit, and I'm saying that their pitching was tired. Okay, so testimony from Jackson and from Chakotay and from Lefty Williams' grand jury is that they all played to win the game. They all played to win the game. They took the money, yes, but they were playing to win the game. Now, Chakotay and Lefty Williams, Chakotay threw 306 innings that year. Okay, Lefty Williams threw 297 innings that year. The most a Reds pitcher threw that year was 248 by Hod Eller, and they had Dutch Ruther with 242. Like they were going off 5 starters. They had 5 starters with 175 innings or more. Meanwhile, the White Sox had 4 starters with 162 or more, and 3 of those starters were above 200, and 2 of them were almost at 300 innings. So they basically relied on 2 pitchers the entire year. And then you're going to expect them to win the World Series? Get out of here, man. So the White Sox lose game 1, 9-1. Okay. Really didn't have... Yeah, the Reds won 9-1, but it wasn't like anything out of the ordinary. See what I'm saying? Because Chakotay still pitched somewhat well, just not as well as he normally would. So I mean, there wasn't like a whole lot of fishiness around to it, but there was, because let's really think about this. You have 25 guys on a baseball team, and you're trying to throw a World Series with just 8. That's going to be a little hard to do. Yeah, 2 of them are pitchers, but what about the other 2 pitchers that they're throwing out that day as well? And realistically, the White Sox went with 3 pitchers that series for the series, while the Reds threw out 5 pitchers for the series. So the Reds were a little bit more smarter in this. Like, let's have more pitchers. And the Reds pitching staff that year had their ERA was a 2.23. So they were a dominant pitching staff. Meanwhile, the White Sox ERA that year was a 3.04. Wasn't that dominant. They had the offense, yes, but with the Reds pitching, it was able to soften that lineup. So I really think that even if you go in and throw out the fixed allegations here, I really think the Reds were probably the better team anyways to win this game. Because the Reds batted .255 in the series, they had a .335 on-base percentage, and they had a .351 slugging percentage, okay? They had 7 triples, 10 doubles, they had 64 hits, and they scored 35 runs. Okay? And that wasn't much different than what their regular season stats were, because in the regular season they batted .263, and they had 143 stolen bases. So in the World Series they had 7. There wasn't really that much of a difference. Meanwhile, the White Sox over here, they had a 274, they had a 224 batting average. And Shoeless Joe Jackson batted .375 for the game, and hit the series' only home run. In fact, the three of the 4 best hitters for the White Sox were Buck Weaver, accused of fixing it, Shoeless Joe Jackson, Chick Gandil, and Eddie Collins, who was one of the ones that wasn't on the fix. I mean, even Happy Felsch had 5 hits. So, I'm sorry. your guys showed up, but just not all at once because, again, you went 26 innings without scoring a run, and your pitching staff did absolutely nothing. I mean, so you had Lefty Williams at a 6.61 ERA, but at the same time, he was already, at the end of the season, he was already not winning games as it was and was pitching on very short days of rest. Eddie Chicote went 2.91, similar to his it was 1 point higher than what his league average was for the year. Okay? And then you had Dickie Kerr, who had a 1.42, and he usually had a 2.88 in the regular season. So, again, like, a lot of this stuff doesn't really make it to where I'm convinced that even if there wasn't a fix, and I put that in quotation marks, that the game would have been lost, or the World Series would have been lost by the Red Sox or by the White Sox. I really think the Reds were the better team that year. So let's get into real quick let's go with the Black Sox scandal by Bill Lamb. He really goes into some in-depthness here of how the plot hole started. First of all, let's get some of the myths out of the way. The White Sox had probably one of the highest payrolls of the time. So the assumption that Comiskey wasn't paying his players is the reason why they threw the game can't be true. None of the players said that in any of their depositions. None of the players said that in any interviews. Nothing like that. In fact, Chicote was the top of the pay scale for pitchers, and most of the players were top of the pay scales for their positions altogether. All right. And in fact, Eddie Chicote, his faction first began to discuss the feasibility of throwing the World Series during a trip in the late regular season, even before any bonuses would have been held out or anything else like that. They really just were doing it for the money. Let's be real. So, I mean, and again, according to Chicote, the Sox were envious of the $10,000 payoffs rumored to have been paid to certain members of the Cubs for the 1918 World Series against the Red Sox. To lure of a similar score was enhanced by the low process of discovery or punishment. So even the 1918 World Series, again, there was talk about it being fixed, that one being fixed as well. So Red Sox, you Red Sox fans, your 1918 World Series should have an asterisk next to it as being fixed as well. Just saying. So then it wasn't until late September, that Gandil and Chicote decided to, hey, let's have a meeting. They recruited Lefty Williams and Joe Jackson as well. And then they talked with Burns. He was going to set it up with everybody else. So, yeah, and then the parties agreed that the World Series would be lost to the National League champion Reds in exchange for a $100,000 payoff. Obviously, Burns couldn't fund this payoff, so he therefore went to Arnold Rothstein, a.k.a. the Big Bankroll, and basically told him about the plot. Rothstein's like, nah, I'm not really going to do that right now, and turned it down. So then the prospect of fixed financing was revived by Hal Chase, who knows how he heard about gotten wind of the scheme. But Chase put Burns in touch with Abe Attell and also put him into contact with the Des Moines gambler David Zeltzer. Okay, so Attell met with Burns and informed him that Rothstein had reconsidered the fixed proposition and was now willing to finance it. And the credulous Burns thereupon hastened to Cincinnati to rendezvous with the players on the eve of Game 1. So, in the meantime, the campaign to fix the series had also opened up on a second front. So shortly before the White Sox scheduled to leave for Cincinnati, Gandil, Chicote, Weaver, and other fixed enlistees met privately at the Warner Hotel. Chakotay demanded that he was mistrustful of the whole thing and wanted his fixed share up front, paid in full, before they departed for Cincinnati. Okay, so then he left this whole thing, and then Sullivan and Brown, as they were called, it turned out to be Gandel's Boston pal Sport Sullivan, and then according to nobody really knows the true identity of who Brown was, but Abe Attell asserts that it was Nate Evans, a Rothstein subordinate. So he's really trying to say that Rothstein was basically the mastermind of this whole thing. I don't buy into the Rothstein being the mastermind of the whole thing. So Lefty Williams later testified that he wasn't sure who these men were, if they were gamblers or representatives. Either way, at the end of the night, Chakotay had $10,000 underneath his pillow in his hotel room. So then the Warner Hotel conclave was unknown to Burns. So here you have Burns doesn't know about it, and then Gandel's put together this side of it. So Burns, Attell, and Bennett and Zelser met with all the cooperative players except for Joe Jackson in Cincinnati, and then it was agreed after some wrangling that they would be paid off in $20,000 installments following each White Sox loss in the best of 5 of 9 series. So this is where Hugh Fullerton comes into place, and his ears start ringing a little bit, because as Burns is leaving the hotel, he runs into Hugh Fullerton, who's an old acquaintance, and Fullerton had confidently predicted the White Sox would triumph, and Burns made the assurance that the Reds were a sure thing. So then Fullerton starts thinking, there's something afoot here, and so then he starts watching the game. Him and Chrissy Mathewson then start breaking down the games and putting it in newspapers, and everybody was thinking, yeah, whatever, it's not really a thing, whatnot. So then this is where it gets really, really tricky. So game 1, the White Sox lose, right? And then they were stiffed after that first loss. Attell didn't pay him the $20,000. So the White Sox fulfilled their side of the fixed agreement in game 2, and then they still got stiffed. So now they're owed $40,000. But then Burns only delivered $10,000 to the players after game 2. So then what ends up happening is Gandil so then still he and Mark accepted Gandil's assurance that the Sox would lose game 3. The two fixed middlemen were then wiped out, losing their entire wagering stake when the White Sox posted a 3-0 victory behind Dickie Kerr. Okay? So again, whether this was they continued or not, because Jackson did state that they did try to throw game 3, only to be thwarted by Kerr's superb pitching performance. However, Chick Gandil did hit a two RBI single to win the game as well. Just saying. So there was probably a little bit of a little get back at that game, and then they would go on to lose the fourth game. They would lose that. Chakotay pitched good, but there was a couple of misplays that he had on defense, which wasn't out of the norm for him realistically, because Chakotay wasn't really a defensive pitcher. He wasn't that type of guy as I looked through his stats. So he did receive a little offensive help because they were, like I said, this is also when the White Sox were in a 26 consecutive innings without scoring as well. And they went silent again in Game 5, only imagining 3 hits and losing 5-0. So, meanwhile, uncertainty reigned in gambling quarters after the unscripted White Sox victory in Game 3. Burns reportedly acting at the behest of Abe Attell approached Gandil about resuming the fix. Gandil didn't say anything to him, but that brought the curtain down on the debasement that the 1919 World Series was far from clear. So then Burns, Attell, Zeltzer combined was not the only group that the White Sox had taken money from. Again, there was other groups that they had taken money from, right? So nobody knows how much money they made from the other ventures because there was two other factions going on here. So here you have the White Sox basically setting up with all these gambling circles to throw the game, it seems like, and just taking their money. Doesn't mean they're going to actually lose the series. They're just taking their money at this point. So, and then after that game 2, player gambling falling out, and then game 3 with the win, and then obviously game 4 and 5 they lose. They end up getting with Carl Zork and from St. Louis, who's a St. Louis clothing manufacturer and gambler, and Omaha bookmaker Benjamin Franklin, and they were invested in a Red Series triumph. Like, they had money tied up to this. So they wanted to make sure the fix was in, is what they were trying to do. So then back on the diamond, the White Sox teetered on brink of elimination, having only won one of the first 5 series games. They looked to lose game 6, but then their bats finally came out alive, and you had Buck Weaver, Joe Jackson, and Happy Felsch all get hits, and then they rally in 10 to win. So again, they're playing to win this game. So what ends up happening though is that and then they end up winning game 4, or not game 4. They end up winning the next game, game 7, 4-1, behind RBI hits by Jackson and Felsch. So again, you have the guys that were in on the fix still hitting the ball, okay, and still progressing. And then Lefty Williams, again, I am telling you, his entire reasoning for his postseason demise is because of the of his tired arm. That's all there is to it. So they end up losing game 8, and then Hugh Fullerton comes out the next day, puts out the rumors that, hey, this is, that there's stuff out here, there's gambling things, gambling issues, all this other things, and then you got Comiskey, who still believes it and ends up bringing all the players back, but then starting to do his own investigations and into the fixing as well, and come to find out that the rumors were true, that there was a fix. And what does Charles Comiskey do? He tries to keep it hush-hush for his own self-interest. Because at this point, Babe Ruth is hitting bombs. The 1920 White Sox are running rampant in the American League. And it's now post-World War I, and now all the normalcy is starting to come back that was pre-World War I. So baseball is at its heights. Comiskey's getting all this money. And then you have a game in late August between the Cubs and the Phillies that was thrown. And that's when Bill Veeck Sr. and William Wrigley get livid, because there was also rumors that the 1919 PCL crown was thrown as well, and was livid over the prospect that his Angels were cheated out of the PCL pennant. So Bill Veeck is now pissed off and wants a investigation into this. Okay, prompted Veeck to make public disclosure of the Cubs-Phillies fix reports and to pledge Club Corporation with any investigation to do so. Okay, the revelation of that outcome then turns its attention back to the Black Sox, because Cook County Judge McDonald and Ban Johnson weren't a fan, basically wanted to get, and Ban Johnson still wanted to get gambling out of all baseball, is where it's at. So then other baseball fans kept pressing for a grand jury. They come to get a grand jury. The grand jury is supposed to look at the Phillies Cubs, and it turns out to be looking at the 1919 World Series instead. Oh man, this is like bonkers stuff to it. Okay, so then the Cubs-Phillies game gets relegated to secondary status, right? And then for the next 2 years, you have them investigating the 1919 World Series and the Black Sox, okay? Or the White Sox. So, and it was on October 29th, so on September 27th, basically everybody that was involved in the thing was came to light. And so, let's see. Hold on. Where was this at? So, September 22nd, 1922, that's when the panel's attention would be focused on the World Series. There'd be a grand jury summons, and then you would have public commentary by the grand jury foreman, the prosecuting attorney, the judge himself, and then you'd have the Chicago Tribune announce impending indictments of 8 White Sox players: Chakotay, Gandil, Jackson, Weaver, Williams, Felsch, Reisberg, and McMullen. They were charged with a generic conspiracy to commit an illegal act. And, yeah. So, Bill Mareg declared, and then on September 27th, 1920, in addition of the Philadelphia North American, Billy Marag declared that games 1, 2, and 8 of the World Series had been rigged. Yeah, so it kind of just, and then that like went all over the place. And then you had a day later, Eddie Chakotay and Joe Jackson admitted agreeing to accept a payoff to lose the series when interviewed by White Sox legal counsel. And then they repeated this oath under admission under oath before a grand jury, but neither confessed to making a deliberate misplay during the series. They just said, yeah, we took the money and agreed to throw the series, but we really didn't try to throw the series. So press accounts said that Chakotay described how he lobbed hittable pitches to the plate, but it was all entirely bogus. That Jackson and Chakotay did none of that stuff. They didn't fell at the field or at bats, and he didn't lob pitches in there. So they both insisted that they won at all times. Other participants, the other player participants in the series fixed were identified by Chakotay and Jackson, but apart from laying blame on Gandil, neither man disclosed much knowledge of how the fix even had been started or financed. And then Lefty Williams did the same thing the following day, saying the same thing. I played to win the game. You know, basically identified who was in on it, didn't know who started it, nothing like that. Or I should say, he did put names on some of the gambler conspirators, saying Sullivan and Brown, and Burns and Adel and Bennett as well. So Williams kind of opened up that whole can of worms. And then Happy Felsch was on the same thing, where he admitted his complicity to the fixed plot and acceptance of gamblers' money, but didn't have anything. So you have all these players saying the same thing. So then on 29th of October, 5 counts of conspiracy to obtain money by false pretenses or a confidence game were returned against the Black Sox, the gamblers, and everybody else. And then you had an election in 21. Then you had an election in November of 20. So then you had all these new people come through. And then the judge is like, hey, trial date's starting here. The new attorney's like, wait, drops all the charges against everybody, and then refiles the charges to give him more time to come up with a case. So goes to trial. They bring up Bill. They go get Bill Burns from the Mexican border, and thanks to Billy Marg, who was financed by Ban Johnson to go get this. So here, Ban Johnson's really, really digging his heels in to getting this done. So they put Bill Burns on the stand, and basically he turns state's evidence, whatnot, gives him all the details, and then, so then everyone thought that all the Black Sox were going to take the stand. So Bill Burns takes a stand. Then they bring up Billy Morag, and then they don't. Then the state doesn't bring anybody else up after that, even though they had a whole list of people that they were going to, until they're ending their case. Well, then the defense didn't bring anybody up from there, and what they did was they presented White Sox club secretary Harry Grabner to testify about club revenues and undermine the contention that team owner Comiskey or the White Sox Corporation had been injured by the fix of the 1919 World Series, which the jury foreman later would tell the judge that influenced us more than any other witness. So then the defense sits, rests, and then you don't have rebuttal witnesses because there wasn't any witnesses to be rebutted. So then the state-related case was kind of like not tight enough to convict any of them. So then after 3 hours of deliberation, the jury comes back with a not guilty on all of them, on all these folks, and then they get outside and take a picture. The jury, the players, the attorneys with the defense attorneys, and all the gamblers take a picture on the steps with the judge in front of the courthouse. And then they all go eat dinner together. And then it's all happy trails after that. Until Commissioner Kennesaw Mount Landis looks at what happened to the PCL players who got their case dismissed. And then so he looks at that precedent and says, oh, well, he banned their players even though there was no court agreement. So with the edict, here's what he said. Regardless of the verdict of juries, Landis permanently barred the 8 Black Sox players from participation in organized baseball. And with that, Joe Jackson, Eddie Chakotay, Buck Weaver, and the rest of them were out, never played a major league game ever again. And it all started with a Cubs-Phillies screw-up. And then they just wanted to make basically the 1919 World Series whole thing was to basically the 1919 World Series was the example, will set the example to never bet again until you had Pete Rose, who then bet on baseball again. Again, I would go to all of these sites to read what you can. Go to all of them, read them, find them. The Black Sox Scandal by Bill Lamb. You can find that on saber.org. Baseballreference.com has all the stats. Check it out. Jacob Pomrenke, his 3 articles are by far the best articles I've ever read. So before I finish here, let's go with so you have Jackson, who signed a contract in February 1920, and Comiskey already knowing that what he knew about the World Series as it was, and re-signs Jackson to a 3-year deal, and then he goes, let's go, and then Jackson's like, I'm not going to pay it, obviously, so then Jackson sued him, and Jackson takes a stand and basically lied and lost his fight there because they brought out the grand jury testimony that he said, yeah, I was part of it, and then he was saying he wasn't part of it at all. So then the jury awarded him the wins because the jury's like, hey, the club knew he already did it, so he should get paid anyway. And the judge is like, well, it was done on basically Jackson lied, and there we go. So then Joe Jackson dies in 1951 as one of probably the greatest baseball players never to reach the Hall of Fame. And at this point, I'm thinking, let's treat the 1919 Chicago White Sox players the same way. I mean, here's the deal. We should treat the 1919 White Sox players, okay? And I feel like this way about the steroid players, is that they should be in the Hall of Fame. The players that deserve to be in the Hall of Fame should be in the Hall of Fame because everybody was doing roids at the time, and everybody was gambling on baseball and throwing games. That's all I'm saying. So, again, go check this stuff out. I went way over my time, but there was a lot of information to unpack here. I went fast. I know it. So you might have to come back and listen to this episode 2 or 3 times. But, hey, make sure you download it at least once. I get download credits, so that's what we need to do. All right. Also, find me on Twitter, One Guy with a Mic. And we'll talk more about this because as a kid, I was always fascinated with the Black Sox, and now I've read more articles and I'm even more fascinated about it. And I should have probably done a 2-part about this, but I think next week we're going to do point shaving in basketball because that's fun as well. So, y'all have a good night, good evening. Thanks for sticking around for the hour with me. Holy Hannah, that was a lot in a little amount of time. So again, go check out all those websites. They're going to have a lot more information than I just gave you. But I'm telling you right now, I really don't think the Chicago White Sox were trying to we're going to throw that World Series because the stats say that the Reds were the better team. Just saying. All right. You all have a good night. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on TikTok. Coming soon on TikTok, by the way, if you reach this far, there will be a knuckleball special, a TikTok video, slow pitch softball legend here with the underhanded knuckleball. Will be posted on TikTok within the month. All right. I'm out. Go Cubs go. We suck, I know, but we're better than the White Sox. And it's the Cubs' fault that the White Sox got screwed over. So I love that part of the story. All right, have a good night, everybody.
It was just another ordinary day in the offices of the Pittsburgh Guardian newspaper circa 1924. But for Marla Delft, assistant editor, everything was about to change. For she was about to discover the awesome attractiveness of Row 1 brand retro sports paraphernalia items thanks to Orville Mulligan, sports writer.
And there it is.
Wow, Orville, that's really the bee's knees.
Isn't it just? A poster-sized replica of the actual 1909 World Series program cover.
I can see that. But where did you get it? And where'd you get it framed?
I ordered it from the Row 1 website, where over 6,000 items of sports memorabilia from the 1880s to the 1990s are available for reproduction, in multiple sizes and in several different materials, with over a dozen styles of frame to choose from for prints like this.
Well, I'm sure Mr. Delft would love to put up more of these in the office. But I'm equally as sure they're beyond this newspaper's budget.
Not at all, my dear Marla. See for yourself. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com/row1.
sportshistorynetwork.com/row1. Oh my, these are good prices. Oh, and look at this stuff. Oklahoma-Nebraska football, college basketball art, Michael Jordan items.
And so
retro
it was that
sports
Marla Delft
advertisement
discovered the
placards.
splendiferous magic of Row 1 sports memorabilia, arts, and prints. You can too by visiting sportshistorynetwork.com/row1. That's ROW1 today for access to the full Row 1 catalog of gallery prints and gifts like t-shirts, long-sleeve shirts, telephone cases, coffee mugs, blankets, pillows, towels, and even shower curtains. Act today for 15% discount off all prints with coupon code SHN15 and 20% off all other items with coupon code SHN20 at checkout. And keep your dial locked to the Sports History Network for the exciting chronicles of the 1920 sports world in Orville Mulligan, sports writer. Coming soon.